advise members that questions 2 and 5 are grouped together. I call question 1 in the name questions on education and skills. Question 1, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what measures are in place to increase the number of young people taking SQA qualifications in modern languages.
Cabinet Secretary Mr Swilly.
Presiding Officer, language learning equips young people with skills for an increasingly complex and globalised world, helps build literacy and fosters tolerance and respect. Since 2013, we have provided nearly £40 million to fund local authorities and partners to support the implementation of the 1+2 languages policy. Evidence from local authorities shows the approach is working, and more young people than ever before are learning languages in Scotland.
Murdo Fraser.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. I would share his view that learning modern languages is vital to equip young people with the skills they need for the future economy. But according to research by Professor Jim Scott, there is a serious issue with schools not teaching modern languages in S1 to S3 at the same time as they are being squeezed out in the senior phase as a result of schools offering 6 subjects in S4 as against 8 as many offered previously. What more can the Cabinet Secretary do specifically to help address this concern?
Cabinet Secretary.
The first point I'd say is that in the broad general education, young people have an entitlement to language learning, so there should be appropriate provision for language learning within the broad general education for young people. In the senior phase, as we have rehearsed in previous discussions, there are a multiplicity of opportunities for young people to take SQA qualifications in the senior phase if the senior phase is approached as it was originally envisaged as a 3-year experience. And I would encourage schools to ensure that young people have the opportunity to pursue language learning where young people have an interest in so doing.
Question 2, Maurice Corrie.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to address the reported rise in disruptive incidents caused by
Corrie,
pupils in schools.
Mr Corrie, where's your microphone?
Sorry,
where's your microphone? There
sorry,
you go.
I beg
Start
your pardon.
again.
Sorry, President Officer. Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to address the reported rise in disruptive incidents caused by pupils in schools and the impact that it has on teaching staff.
Your papers were having a wee bit of impact on your microphone there. Cabinet Secretary.
I trust you heard it.
Presiding Officer, we are clear that no teacher should have to suffer abuse in the workplace, whether that be verbal or physical abuse. We are supporting local authorities and schools through various guidance and programmes to promote positive relationships and tackle indiscipline, including good behaviour management, restorative approaches and programmes to support social, emotional and behavioural skills. We are taking a range of actions to support teachers' well-being, to improve recruitment and retention rates, improve teachers' pay and tackle workload. This includes clarifying and simplifying the curriculum framework, removing unnecessary bureaucracy and increasing teacher numbers.
Maurice Corrie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. The National Association of Schoolmasters and Union of Women Teachers found that 85% of teachers across Scotland believe there is a widespread problem with pupil behaviour in schools today. According to the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association, this indiscipline has worsened because of the reduction in specialist teachers and educational support. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what he's doing to provide extra support for teachers and pupils alike who are experiencing these pressures?
Cabinet Secretary.
By coincidence, Presiding Officer, I've just completed my biannual meeting with the National Association, the NASUWT, and we discussed these very issues just in the last hour or so. And I think the NASUWT, as with the other professional associations, acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of school pupils in Scotland's schools behave well, but where there is unacceptable behaviour, that unacceptable behaviour must be tackled by the policy approach that we have set out, which has been jointly developed by the government, local authorities and professional associations. And that's exactly how it should be, to make sure that we have the correct approaches in place to tackle to encourage the creation of positive relationships and to tackle indiscipline. Now, in relation to staffing issues, we have, of course, we're now at a 10-year high in teacher numbers at 52,247. And we're also seeing an increasing number of individuals working with young people with additional support needs within our schools. So I assure Mr Corrie that every effort is being undertaken to strengthen the capacity of schools to operate in this way, and we have the policy framework in place agreed with our partners to make sure that schools are well informed about all of the steps that should be taken to de-escalate incidents and to ensure that a positive behavioural ethos is encouraged in all of our schools.
Question 5, Richard Lyle.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's having with local authorities regarding pupils who are excluded from school.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, exclusions have continued to fall year on year since 2002-03, with the rate of exclusions being almost two-thirds lower than that of the comparable figure for 2006-07. The Scottish Government published refreshed guidance on preventing and managing school exclusions in June 2017. This focuses on the importance of early intervention to prevent the need for exclusion and promotes positive relationships in schools, recognising that exclusion should only be used as a last resort and where it is a proportionate response. Since publication, we have engaged with 400 stakeholders across Scotland, including from local authorities, to support implementation.
Richard Lyle.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer, and I know the work that he's doing in regards to this, but over the last number of months I've been contacted by parents with young primary school children who are being excluded from school due to ADHD and other behavioural problems. Parents feel that local schools and authority, particularly North Lanarkshire Council, is not dealing quickly enough with these problems. And so therefore I want to ask the Cabinet Secretary, what action can the Scottish Government take to resolve this issue for my constituents, and could he actually contact North Lanarkshire Council and ask them to desist from excluding young children from school?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I want to assure Mr Lyle that the focus of our policy approach is to make sure that children and young people receive the support that they require, whatever their needs, to enable them to fulfil their potential. And our guidance on inclusion in schools is framed on exactly that premise. So the policy framework should support young people. I'm conscious of the fact that where young people present with conditions such as ADHD, they will require specific and focused support to meet their needs. That is only fair on them and only fair on other pupils within mainstream settings with whom they may be educated. These are fundamentally issues for local authorities, but if Mr Lyle wishes to give me any specific details, I'll be happy to raise those directly with North Lanarkshire Council on his behalf.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I begin by thanking Richard Lyle for raising this issue, and can remind the Chamber of my own diagnosis. It's just over a year ago that the report Not Included, Not Engaged, Not Involved was published. I held a members' debate and the Cabinet Secretary gave an undertaking to consider the recommendations and to meet with stakeholders. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what communications has he held with education authorities about ending the policy of, that ends in unlawful exclusion of children with neurodevelopmental disorders, and what changes in policy and practice have been made in relation to those communications? Cabinet Secretary.
As Mr Johnson knows, the issues that he raised in his members' debate were the subject of active debate at that time, which was followed up by a roundtable discussion in which I drew together a number of the authors of that particular report with local authorities and other stakeholders within Scottish education to advance the very issues that Mr Johnson fairly raises with me today. As a consequence of that, we have been working and been in discussion with the Children's Commissioner in Scotland and also with the Human Rights Commission in Scotland on the formulation of policy guidance that can be applied within our education system to ensure that we have a human rights-based approach to the question of inclusion within education for young people in the circumstances that Mr Johnson recounts. We've had a very good dialogue with the Commissioners on that question, and they have accepted my explanation that we need to take time and care to prepare that guidance to make sure it can be applied and implemented swiftly, which I hope Mr Johnson understands. We have agreed to ongoing dialogue about the progress in relation to that design and implementation, and I will of course keep Parliament updated on those questions as time takes course.
Question 3, Mary Fee.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many local authorities offer digital school registration.
Cabinet Secretary.
Local authorities and schools determine the most appropriate methods to record pupils' school attendance. Therefore, it's not collected by the Scottish Government. For all young people to achieve their potential, schools should consider each pupil's positive engagement with learning. To support schools, we published revised guidance last year, included Engaged and Involved Part 1, Attendance in Scottish Schools, which provides advice on good practice, including that schools should have a clear strategic plan to promote and manage attendance, identified personnel and systems to track and monitor attendance, and requirements for classifying and recording attendance and absence.
Mary Fee.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response? In West Scotland region, only 2 out of 7 councils have an online option to register a child for primary school. What further work can the Scottish Government do to encourage more local authorities to offer online registration, making it easier for parents, especially those who may lose hours at work and, in some instances, income, in order to register a child in person?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm very happy to explore that issue with local authorities. It is clearly an issue which will be associated with the operation of the CMIS system, which is entirely handled by local authorities. And as I have discovered on different issues that we have addressed, it takes time to amend that. But I'm very happy to explore the issue on Mary Fee's behalf, and if she wishes to write to me with further details, I'd be only too happy to explore that and to advise Parliament accordingly.
Question 4, Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the financial sustainability of the further education sector.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
Scotland's colleges are operating in a complex and changing financial environment, and as we know, with the added uncertainty due to Brexit. The college sector has a strong track record of adapting to change and managing challenges, however. The Scottish Funding Council will continue to monitor individual institutions and engage with those colleges to provide support where required.
Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Last year, Audit Scotland identified that the college funding settlement would stretch only to covering changes in staff pay and conditions, with capital funding falling short of the cost of maintaining the college estate. We've heard that the cost of these funding constraints not only in UHI colleges in my region, but across Scotland. Yesterday, ministers published their refreshed economic action plan, proposing our college sector is to have a significant role in change, being seen as a world leader in skills and training. So can the minister clarify, ahead of the budget, will an already struggling college sector be expected to find additional resources? Will there be a real increase in funding to match these expectations, or will grand ambitions around lifelong learning simply be watered down?
I could do a shorter question, however. Minister.
I'll try and answer a proportion of the questions from the member. Firstly, I think we have the potential for a world-leading college sector in Scotland, and we're well on the way to that, and I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing around Scotland's campuses. It is worth saying that since 2007, we've invested more than £7 billion in Scotland's colleges and set against a £2 billion real terms cut to a resource block grant over the last decade by the UK government, his government. We do continue to support colleges by allocating over £600 million to colleges in the current 2019-20 budget. In terms of the forthcoming budget discussions, it is of course open to Mr Halcrow-Johnson and his party to make college funding a priority in his discussions if he wishes to have them in his party and the Scottish Government.
Ian Gray.
Thank you. Colleges Scotland themselves have identified the sum of £29.4 million above baseline additional revenue funding, which they will require in the next financial year to achieve financial stability. Will that request be granted?
Minister.
Well, I'm sure Mr Gray won't be surprised. I'm not going to preempt the budget announcement because it's not been made yet. However, of course, we listen closely to the representations from the college sector. We do recognise the financial challenges, but these financial challenges are shared not just by the college sector, but by many sectors and, of course, the Scottish Government as well, in light of the tough financial settlement from the UK Government in recent years. But we will listen closely, of course, to the representations from the college sector.
Question 6, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government how learning opportunities for young people in the Glasgow, Maryhill and Springburn constituency could be impacted by Brexit.
Minister.
Scotland's young people benefit enormously from a relationship with the EU and in particular from participation in the Erasmus Plus programme. The exit from the EU poses a risk of significant reduction in learning opportunities for young people if participation in the Erasmus Plus programme and its successor is not maintained. Negative impact will likely be felt in our youth work provision, in our school exchange programmes and the life-changing opportunities available in our colleges and universities. So the Scottish Government is absolutely clear that all the advantages of European Union membership must be retained so that our young people can continue to reap the benefits of these vital programmes.
Bob Doris.
Minister, Royston Youth Action and my constituents believe Erasmus Plus has been a key opportunity which is worth its weight in gold, and to end it would be a statement of stagnation and backwardness in the community learning and development world. Can I ask the Minister to meet the young people from Royston Youth Action to hear first-hand the contribution that Erasmus Plus has made to learning, and will you join me in urging Boris Johnson to also visit Royston to see for himself the benefits of Erasmus Plus first-hand?
Minister.
I'd be delighted to take up the member's offer to visit Royston Youth Action. I think it's a really important point to bear in mind for all members of all parties in this chamber, that people often think of Erasmus as college or university students on European exchange programmes, which of course is the fundamental part of Erasmus. This is also a programme that benefits youth work and other young people in Scotland as well. And disproportionately more people in Scotland participate in Erasmus than other parts of the UK. Therefore, any dilution of our association with Erasmus and exiting the EU will have a disproportionate damaging impact in Scotland. And the Royston Youth Action Initiative mentioned by Bob Doris is one fine example of what's happening out there in the country that we absolutely must protect moving forward. And Boris Johnson, whose party voted against full membership of Erasmus just last week in the UK Parliament, would do himself a favour if he were to visit initiatives such as that in Royston.
Question 7, Adam Tompkin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the next annual report on its STEM education and training strategy will be published.
Minister.
The next annual report of the STEM education and training strategy will be published in March. Scotland, as we're all aware, is a science and research nation, and we punch above our weight and enjoy a global reputation for our research and innovation, and STEM is an integral part of our future economic and social development.
Adam Tompkin.
I thank the Minister for that answer. One of the central aims of this strategy is, and I quote, to build the capacity of the education and training system to deliver excellent STEM learning. Is the Minister satisfied with the pace of progress in implementing the strategy, given that the latest PISA results show that performance in maths and science is at a record low?
Minister.
Well, in terms of STEM subjects, our PISA performance in science and maths is actually in line with the OECD average. But of course, that does always need to improve, and we do accept that. In terms of whether we're making progress in Scotland at the moment, STEM, I think we are making progress. I was at Kinloss Primary School just last week in my own constituency and was bowled over by the excellent teaching of STEM I saw across all classes in that particular school, and that's been replicated both in primary and secondary across the country. Are we making enough progress? Well, of course, we can make more progress, and that's what's really important to meet the important STEM agenda for Scotland's well-being moving forward.
Question 8, Dean Lockhart.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to figures recording that only 4.1% of participants in the Fair Start Scotland scheme were still in work after 26 weeks.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
We are supporting people towards and into work through Fair Start Scotland, a voluntary service treating people with dignity and respect and without the fear of sanctions. The statistic Mr Lockhart quotes has been willfully or otherwise taken out of context and represents 26-week job outcomes after only 12 months of service delivery. Participants have significant barriers to employment, and they have often been left behind by previous UK government initiatives. That's why intense pre-employment support is available for up to 18 months.
Dean Lockhart.
Well, despite what the Minister has just said, the reality is that only 4% of participants in the Fair Start Scotland scheme were still in work after 26 weeks. This means 60% did not engage in the scheme or dropped out at an early stage. Is the Minister happy with this dismal performance of this scheme, or does he accept that the voluntary nature of the scheme means that the vast majority of people involved are not seriously engaging in the scheme, as shown by these huge dropout numbers?
Minister.
No, I think the voluntary nature of our scheme is the right approach. I think it's one that ensures that people can engage meaningfully because they want to be there and they're not under threat of sanction. I think Mr Lockhart's mask has slipped. It's the same old nasty Tory agenda of using employability services as a mean to leverage people off of benefits. But I can tell him, if he is actually interested, because I've never seen him been hitherto interested in this area. I don't think he's questioned me about it before, but I can tell him that in the first year
of Fair Start Scotland, we have supported a figure equivalent to 9% of the unemployed population of Scotland. DWP has supported the equivalent of only 4% of the unemployed population in England and Wales through their Health and Work programme. DWP's Work Choice programme reached the equivalent of 12% of the unemployed disabled population in Scotland the last year it operated here, whereas Fair Start Scotland in its first year has reached the equivalent of 19% of same population, and 92% of people who take part in our programme have told us that they feel they were treated with fairness and dignity. This is a programme I'm proud of. Mr Lockhart should be ashamed of the agenda his party takes forward in employability.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions, and we'll shortly move on to the next item of business.